talk to us about why it is that you decided to run for Congress.
Well, as you know, in our various discussions, I ran in 2010 and in 2012. And the impetus of me running in 2010 was simply due to the fact that the hope and change we were promised never came, or it came in marginal pieces, but my expectations were a bit more than someone who I felt was overpromising and under-delivering. So after George Bush, we had this blue wave come, and in the aftermath, there was not much fruit to bear, so to speak, and in fact, post 2008, 2009, our wars across the world expanded from 2 countries to 7. Instead of getting universal health care, patients became consumers. Habeas corpus, unfortunately, was suspended through the Section 1021 of the NDAA. So our civil liberties eroded. Quality of life is pretty much, stagnant in terms of wages. There wasn't the delivery that we were all promised never came. So I had this moment of political catharsis. And unfortunately, I had to throw the Democratic Party out the window. Now, at a debate in 2010, when asked who my inspiration was to run for office, I cited Bernie Sanders. And I mentioned this on another show where, I was at the debate and I literally drew, this is a funny story actually, I literally drew a blank when asked the question. The question was asked, so who is your inspiration for running for office? And I looked at the person next to me and I literally took my hand and slapped his lapel. And that person was Warren Mosler. And I said, dude, what's the name of that guy running for independent in Vermont? And he looked over, he's like, Bernie Sanders? I'm like, yes, Bernie Sanders. So I said, Bernie Sanders. And Warren looked at me like, what the hell, but it was a moment we shared. Now, mind you, at the time, I had no idea a lick from Adam what MMT was. And Warren, God bless him, was doing his best to educate and help people understand the whole concept behind modern monetary theory and why, deficit spending on the public purpose is the way to go to stop the artificial disparity, to stop the economic catastrophe and salvage the middle class from further transitioning into the working poor. But he's almost too smart for his own good. And that's a compliment in a way, because it took people like yourself, it's actually you, who kind of, and I hate to use the word dumb down, but you kind of did. You dumbed down MMT for a lot of us. And then I kind of pieced together what the hell he was saying. And then I'm like, oh, I went from having a political moment of catharsis to an economic moment of catharsis. And when I separated the gold standard and did away with, taxes, fund spending myth, that's when the light came on. And I felt I had this moment of embarrassment mixed with anger, and I can only describe it as rage. Real, unadulterated, no holds back kind of rage in thinking that there's this grand myth going on that's dividing people of all classes and even race. I mean, everything is rooted into economics when you think about it. I mean, you've said this many times, and I agree with you, that taxes don't fund spending, and we can all have nice things. The political will simply does not exist at the hands of people who have mismanaged our government for the past 4 decades, to the point where people are scrambling, they're losing their minds, they're committing suicide, they're living hand to mouth, they're homeless. 50% of the American population is on or below the poverty line. It's a mess. It's not a mess, it's a catastrophe. It's this silent catastrophe going on where there's this campaign of economics being weaponized as a tool of attrition. And I'm one of the good guys that wants to go in there and stop that. But to answer the question, back in 2010 I ran, back in 2012 I ran. I was the founder of the Green Party of the United States Virgin Islands. I ran other candidates to office. We all did our best, but I realized that much like in the Virgin Islands, you have this culture of corruption. It was the microcosm of what goes on in the States. So I got to look from the outside in, really at the evil that was going on, not just locally, but nationally as well. And when I met you, the conversation between me and you was more in line of getting you to run than me to run. But someone has to do it, and you impressed upon me that I could. And maybe it wasn't the smartest decision to run this time, because I literally reluctantly decided to run at the 11th hour with just four months to the election. I threw my head in thinking, what, they need a body, but they also need a fighter. you know, and I like to think I'm both a body and a fighter, you know, but you know, it was your words that resonated in me. You know, you said to me, Guy, you got a kid. You got a kid. Not only do you have a kid, you have a kid on that has a disability. You know, what are his chances going to be like if we don't have people like you fighting the good fight, standing up? You know, and I said, you know, I said, you're right. I want to be able to look my kid in the eye years from now, hopefully decades from now. Hopefully things will have changed, but if they don't, if we stay the course and the earth is on fire, I'm going to kneel on, well, I'm not going to kneel, he'll be older, but I'll look at him in the eye and say, hey, you know, I did my best to avoid climate disaster. I did my best to avoid artificial disparity. I did my best so that we can have equality for everyone, that we can have, you know, all the things that we're clamoring for: universal health care, federally funded education, maternity leave, paternity leave, for a livable wage, and not just at $15 an hour. I mean, that's like the catchphrase of the day. It should be more in line of like $25, even $30 an hour, you know, adjusted for the cost of living and inflation. I mean, there's just so much to say, and I don't know what we're going to cover in the time that we have, but my heart is in it. You know, I want to serve. I think the greatest act one can do, honestly, is to serve and to ensure that future generations are not left in the hands of sociopaths, because that's what we have right now. We have, you know, look, there's nothing wrong with being there's nothing wrong with being successful and being driven to succeed. But if what you do is toxic to the environment, if it's toxic to humanity, if it you know operates as a means of you know disrupting our genome, you know, disrupting our endocrine system, you know, disrupting our central nervous system, our health, public health, then you got to stop. We have to stop. Big oil, you got to die. Big agriculture, you got to die. We got to find some other way to harness energy, renewable ideally, the Green New Deal that we have to pay for with MMT. You know, we have to find a better way of growing food.